college. I'm not an expert in AI. As a matter of fact, I'm quite apprehensive when it comes to AI. And I tend to find, like, we come from a law background, we are conservative, we change slower than other disciplines, I think. But I realized that I need to be it in my own way then, embrace AI because it's part of the legal landscape in practice, more and more. I'm not going to quote statistics here, but more and more that happens. As a matter of fact, some firms are now asking specifically their lawyers to spend X amount of hours on specifically AI in a week. It's not going to change. It's not going to go away with the students. We all know they all use it. So I decided, okay, let me do my basic, let me slowly move into this area. So I looked at this kind of specifically critical thinking skills because I think that's important, obviously, in education in general. But from the legal education perspective, maybe, in a way, you're a bit structured, pedantic about it, you can even say, because I teach law of contracts, the module. So I want the critical thinking skills I'm looking at for my students is, can they understand, can they identify the legal dispute? Do they understand what the law says about it? Can they apply it? And can they deal with counter arguments? That's the direction I would go. To be able to do that, you need to have certain critical thinking skills and you need to develop that. So that's how I got to this. So the advantages to AI, there's only a few I've listed, of course, there's far more. What I've seen in the research I've done, particularly useful is I'm now thinking regarding students, the personalized feedback, they like that, immediate feedback, they really like that. And of course, it can be more specific. You can cater to students' needs because of AI. That I think is very important. Teaching, you can identify the factors and issues in the learning, teaching and learning. And we all know it influences how they work, what they do, how they think, how they work. So that's why I realized I need to embrace this because it's not going to change. And of course, it can be helps with more inclusivity and it assists with research. Okay, the ethical issues, I'm not going to discuss that today, but I mean, that's well documented. There are definitely ethical issues specifically in law as well when dealing with AI. But the one I focused on is because I think, and lots of speakers have mentioned this previously as well, often students just see this as a tool. It's a quick fix to get to your answer, to help me with an assignment or whatever the case may be. And I was thinking, that's not what I want. Of course, part of that will come in, of course. But I want, if I use the AI, it must be used in a manner that also develops these critical thinking skills. So that's what I looked at. Okay, now I'm not going to go into critical thinking. There are lots of theories, discussions, definitions. But I think for me, if I look at the critical thinking, I want someone that evaluates, someone that assesses, open-minded, open to biases, their own biases, that are clear about issues, that is sort of rooted in reasoning, specifically in law. So that's what I look at when I looked at this. Right, so then I came across a study which I found very interesting, an Indonesian study done at Indonesian University. And what they did was, they had a specific module, criminal justice. They had 100 participants, 50 in the control group, 15 in the experimental group. The experimental group used an AI tool. And very importantly, it was a specific designed for the course. They did the research, and the AI tool was very specific. It took the content, it was, of course, Indonesian legislation, case law, etc. But it also included specifically Indonesian cultures, customs, way of communicating, verbally and non-verbally. So that tool was very specifically geared for that module. The students also had a lot of exposure training and they used it for a full term. The control group used the ordinary methods of teaching, like discussion, question, answer, debating in class, answering questions in class, that type of thing. They did not use the AI tool. They did the pre-test, post-test, mixed method they used, so to add the results, and they also had semi-structured interviews with participants to get some feedback. And what they also used is with the AI tool, the students could obviously use it with a physical text, but also the AI assisted them. They had some video analysis. They would look at, for instance, someone doing a testimony in in court because there's no criminal justice. And then the AI tool would help them with looking at non-verbal clues, verbal clues, things like saying, all sorts of that type of communication. So it was not just for the physical, like you would use it, the tool for the text, but also for the video analysis. Right. So now the findings. Sorry, my mistake. Right. In general, they were very positive with the results. Of the 50 participants that now use the AI tool experimental group, 85% of their marks improved. So quantitatively. They were also very positive about the tool itself in their interviews. They found it to be great motivation. They loved the personal, immediate feedback. They really loved that a lot. And they could see how it motivated them, helped them, and also, so they're very positive in general about it. It was also very, they enjoyed the way it was integrated with the other course material and interfacing. It was very good, all good. They also found in the results that the group that used the AI tool, their results improved significantly more than the group that only used the traditional methods. Right. They had some limitations that mentioned. Of course, it was a fairly small study, only 100 participants and only at one institution. But one thing they mentioned that drew my attention was the fact that they admitted, I think, which I suppose is fairly understandable, that the long-term influence of AI use. We don't know what's the long-term influence on students' actual academic progress. And I think that to me is very important because I can understand, I can see short-term benefits. But if we're looking at, like, if I want to use a tool, I want a tool to help, to assist, also to develop the students' critical thinking skills that help them when they go out to practice, not just to pass this test or to do well on this assignment. So I think that is very key to what we're discussing here. Now, then I went the other way and I looked at a study done at the University of Minnesota. Now, this study was done in 2023, soon after ChatGPT saw the light. Totally different type of study. Not nearly as focused, not nearly as specific. All they did was they took volunteers, and they had two modules: Introduction to American Law and Insurance Law. Now, the Introduction to American Law was the more generic module, Insurance Law was the more complex one. They took volunteers, there were about 50, and what they did was the students wrote their ordinary exam, and within 2 weeks, they wrote a different exam, but on similar content, after having used the ChatGPT for only 2 weeks. Training was also minimal. They got an hour's training, and helping them with prompting, and then they had to use a tool, and then they looked at the results. So you can see the Indonesian study was far more focused, specific, and tailored specifically. This was more generic. Now, their results or their findings were not as positive as the Indonesian study. What they found was, again, small sample, once off, and I'm not talking about the limitations of the study, but still, they found that with the multiple choice questions, ChatGPT really helped the students. There was a marked improvement. But when it came to, and interestingly, also the weaker students benefited more than the stronger students. But secondly, they found with the more complex questions, like insurance law module specifically, ChatGPT didn't really assist the students. It didn't really make a difference. It didn't help them that much. Okay. Now, looking at all of this, I came now sort of to my own consideration that I looked at. And I think if we start like we said, I think the use of AI, I mean, that goes without saying. But I think it's very important when you want to, and second I want to say, I think, personal opinion, a more specifically designed AI tool, I think, will be more beneficial for this stuff, what I'm trying to do in my module, than a generic GPT type of setup. So I think that's the first thing. Okay. I'll go on back. I think the first thing you need to understand if you go this way, and I want to start using AI-based tools in my module, it's my objectives. What do I want to achieve here? Do I simply want the students to understand the content better? Are they specific, like do I specifically want to develop critical thinking skills? What is the objective? Based on that, and I think your teaching approach must also be included there. How am I going to do this? The example that I saw, one or two examples, they use experimental learning specifically, and that's their approach. So they measured their results, they measured the feedback based on that approach. So I think get your objectives in line. That's important. What do I want to achieve? Which teaching approach am I going to follow? Then I think based on that, you must design the tool and be specific and precise. Then I think after that, I think it's also important to receive feedback, obviously, once introducing the tool. Interestingly enough, for instance, the one study they showed that when it comes to, in law specifically like this, they refer to nuanced judgments, things where there are complex dynamics, like mentioned there, between legal argumentation, interactions between judges, these type of things that happen in courtrooms. There, the AI tool fails a bit because it doesn't always cater for those nuanced judgments, those nuanced evaluations that we find in law. And therefore, I also think what's important and ties in with what I've said is, I do not think the AI tool must be used in isolation. And I think it's important to make the students understand that you still need, call it then, for lack of a better word, a traditional approach. We still need to teach in a certain approach. Still need a certain approach. So AI is not a tool that fixes everything, because in certain places where there are shortfalls, and specifically in law. And when it comes to critical thinking, so for instance, I would, if I introduce an AI-based tool, I would like the students to use that, but I would also like the students at the same time be involved in something like a mock trial, which is an immediate thing, which happens in court, where you do not have the AI tool to develop to. You need to develop your skills to be able to deal with that situation in court. Could the AI tool help you to get there? Yes, it could. But we don't want an over-reliance on it. That we sit with people that becomes the default position. The AI becomes the default. Because, of course, I think as educators, we all understand the danger of that is that it's moving in the wrong direction. And I think, like mentioned also in the previous session, there is that combination that you understand the tool and you understand the importance of it where it fits in, but you also understand its limitations and its dynamics. So then I decided, okay, based on all of that, these are the conclusions. I've mentioned most of these. I think the tool is important, the objectives are important, decide those. And do your research. Look at your context. I think of myself, I've got a class of 300 students in very specific context, a very specific situation. Students from different diverse backgrounds, students, for lots of them, English is not their first language. Okay. So I have to consider all these things when I design my AI tool. I suppose I also have to look at the way the students learn. How do they learn? Because that's important, because the tool will have to line up with that. So that's important. Then I think training is important, of course. Exposure to the tool, understanding of the tool, both for myself as the lecturer and for the students. Because, of course, the better you understand the tool, the more useful it should be. And then, like I said, it should be embedded, I think, in a sound learning approach, and that's obviously up to you. And I think there's far more research being done from my side at least, regarding which type of teaching approach would be the most beneficial for the students to get the most benefit, not just improvement of marks, but also in the development of the critical thinking skills. So in closing, and the feedback, obviously, I think that's very important that you get that from the students so that you can adjust and improve. So I was thinking, my module, I'll start small. I've said I'm not an expert in AI, as a matter of fact, I have a lot to learn. So what I would do is, I'm going to take one study unit. We have 14 across the year. And I'm going to take that study unit and I'm going to sit with the people that know and design a tool. And I think my first aim will just be to see if the tool helps them to understand the content better. And that will lead to improvement in their marks. So it's very simple. I just want to test that first. In that process, of course, we will have to look at, because it's law and because we know how law works and critical thinking, argumentation, legal reasoning, these things all come in. I will have to look at the tool that it does the basics of as far as content, but also the more advanced when it comes to argumentation, when it comes to counter arguments. So that's what I'll have to look at. Then roll out the tool to the students, let them use it, get some feedback, look at the results, design that, and then from that, get my impressions and my feedback. So I think from that perspective, that's why when I did this research, I found it very useful because it gave me some pointers on the direction to go. And I think in closing, from my side, I think if you decide to go the route, like I said, I think we all are doing it per definition. I think it's very important, have your objectives in line, get the more specific tool and the generic tool. I'm not talking about my focus. And I think it can be very useful. Thank you very much.